We find ourselves once again talking about Angela Leadsom. You may remember just a couple of weeks ago, she came out very bizarrely and, well, was extolling the virtues of the single market. Something which, if you know anything about the political figure that is Angela Leadsom, some of you obviously may not be aware of her. She was very, very much a hardcore Brexiteers. Indeed, she very well shares some of the same political beliefs as Liz Truss of all people did. But she was part of Theresa May's cabinet as part of May's, well, attempt at some sort of balancing act. So I'll have this many people who wanted to remain, this many people who wanted to vote leave, etc., etc. And there was even a potential point. Although Angela Leadsom, I think, in this full interview, we like I say, we won't go over it all, disagrees and says, "Oh no, she was right to sort of pull out of the race." A lot of people have very clearly said if she maybe had run on her hard Brexit stance, she could have very well of won the race. Remember, May only won because everyone else pulled out. So maybe we could have had a beta version of Liz Truss in Angela Leadsom had she maybe stepped up to the batting plate instead of Theresa May. Who knows? Maybe in an alternative universe, maybe we could have actually seen that potentially happen. Who knows? But in this interview, interestingly enough, Angela Leadsom is asked often that question we love to ask the hardcore Brexiteers out there. Can you name us any Brexit benefits? Or at least in this case, can you name us 3 Brexit benefits? So let's find out what Angela Leadsom's 3 Brexit benefits actually are. So, but before we do go diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, do remember to ring the bell as well. So, let's crack on with this, shall we? And find out what Angela Leadsom's 3 Brexit benefits are. So, this is how it all kicks off. So, the interviewer says, naturally I am, however, I'd also like to know if Brexit has brought any positive benefits, and could she perhaps name 3? Okay, interesting. Like I say, this is where it all really kicks off. The rest is about her new book, but this is what I'm really interested in: the fact that Angela Leadsom really struggles to name 3. So here she goes. So Angela Leadsom responds and says, "Well, this is the next chapter in our history," she says, "and I'd love to see us becoming a global leader in green technologies." Okay, but that's not exactly a Brexit benefit. That's something we could have done and certainly benefited from under the EU's current plans, where they're trying to sort of do that at the moment. But anyway, the interviewer sort of fires back and says, "But I'm not talking about the dim and distant future. I'm talking about hard gains already made." "Okay," says Leadsom, "I'm going to say we're already a world leader in finance, but we were subject to EU regulations over financial services, and in many cases we disagreed with them. So being out of the EU enables us to lead the world in corporate governance, green mortgages, green funding for infrastructure, right?" But again, we could have done that when we were in the EU. And bear in mind, all evidence suggests that we have seen very, very recently suggests that these big banks, they're leaving London. They're moving out of the UK because they want to be more in the EU. We are seeing the financial brain drain take place. We've seen big American banks, like I think it's Morgan Stanley, move thousands of jobs out of London to Paris. We've seen places like Frankfurt, Amsterdam also massively benefit. And these big banks building brand new big offices there to accommodate staff from London. So it very clearly hasn't. And then that, oh, we're going to be a world leader in financial services. Well, we might be at the moment, but history and all the data suggests maybe not for much longer that financial crown is well and truly slipping, or should we say has already begun to slip very clearly. But anyway, she continues. So the interview goes, right. And what's the second thing on that list? Well, Leadsom fires back. For many Brexiteers, it's about being able to sack your politicians if you don't agree with them. The reality was we were subject to the EU directives that we disagreed with, and the UK ministers were powerless to change that. Again, absolutely, you did have the power over that. That this idea that the UK just had no power is a complete Brexit fantasy myth, because we had veto power. We could have vetoed any of these EU directives that we want, and we did. The reason why we didn't use them was because, according to, again, Andrea Leadsom, no, the UK did agree with the vast majority of EU law and legislation. It was just people like her and her hardcore libertarian free market fundamentalists who wanted crazy law land. And, we saw what happened when Liz Truss took control. So the interview continues. So let's recap. We might be able to lead the world in corporate governance, and we no longer have to abide by EU directives. In the time ration, in a time of course, rationed tomatoes, endless passport queues, and chronic labour shortages, such things do not feel to me to be very tangible in terms of people's everyday lives. Also, when it comes to sacking politicians, May, Johnson, Truss all became prime minister without being elected. But anyway, let's have number 3. Is there one? So this is what we've got for number 3. Andrea Leadsom says, I do have a huge list, but I think you'll be quite negative and closed off to my perspective, even though I respect yours. So instantly, when we're asking for 3, which, to be honest, is not a tall order. And according to Leadsom, she's got a huge list. So excellent. Top 3 on your list. Fire them off. But instantly, she gets defensive and says, oh, well, we've got a big list, but I don't think you're really interested in listening to my perspective. You're being closed-minded. No, it's because Brexiteers like her promised there would be these big instant benefits, and they have been none. They have not been delivered. But these benefits only really, quote, benefit people like her who were believers in this Brexit and this massive free market ideology, which, again, is not popular in the UK. Liz Truss proved that, because it's not even popular in her own Conservative Party. That's why they got rid of Liz Truss as quickly as they could. And I think, to be honest, if the Queen hadn't died, they'd have gotten rid of her even faster. So, anyway, the interview continues. I promised not to be so, Andrea. So, there is being much more open to the world rather than just to the EU. She replies, students loved Erasmus, the EU educational program, because it enabled them to go to European universities. But the reality was that it was mostly Europeans coming to UK universities because we just don't have the language skills. Our fault. Totally understand. Nevertheless, the Turing scheme, the UK's replacement to Erasmus, set up in 2021, opens up the world to our young people. Instead of just learning French or German, they'll have the opportunity to go to India, Australia, Canada, or Nigeria. We're not turning our back on the EU, we're opening up our face to the rest of the world. That's and I agree with what the interviewer said because she responds. I don't think she actually said this to Leadsom, but she said how to respond to all this. It's bizarre. This is about the failure to acknowledge that our replacements for those things, or that we have lost, are even less good, or certainly not better than we had before. And yeah, the Turing scheme, is she referring to the Turing scheme that no one signed up to? And also, he's going on about, oh, we've got, the top universities, we've got, Oxford, Cambridge. That really doesn't matter anymore. This idea of, oh, if you go to Oxford or if you go to Cambridge, who cares? You can go to any other university and get just as good a degree as if you got a law degree from Oxford or if you got a law degree from, I don't know, Nottingham or Edinburgh or something like that. It's just a bit of prestige that you happen to go there. But at the end of the day, the degree is still the degree. You still learn the same things. So yeah, that's just bizarre. That is really, really just bizarre. But anyway, I agree with the interviewer. I don't know how you would respond to that. It's just so bizarre. And to be honest, the interviewer went on and did continue. She said, um, "So the facts are just simply not relevant to her. The non-existent arguments, I suppose." I could ask her what also she thinks to the moon is made of green cheese, but the prospect of her answer would be potentially being, yes, Rachel, it does indeed seem to be made of cheese, but the few curds have passed their sell-by date. But the good news is that we no longer have to follow EU directives on sell-by dates. So it makes me feel very wary. I decided to move on. And bear in mind, obviously, this wasn't an interview about Brexit, but of course, Brexit came up because this is about an interview about Angela Leadsom's new book. But I want to bring up those facts, those 3 points that Leadsom tried to bring up 3 Brexit benefits. All of them are absolutely ridiculous. This idea that now we're out of the EU, we can be a financial leader on corporate governance. Well, all evidence suggests that transition, all that knowledge, all that banking knowledge is slowly trickling over into Europe. The idea of the Turing scheme, again, no one signed up to the Turing scheme. It was embarrassing, and I'm surprised Leadsom even brought that up as an actual example. And then what was the third one? Oh yes, we can sack our MPs, or if we disagreed with an EU directive, we couldn't do anything about it. That's a load of old tosh because you had European MEPs that you could elect to, which would go and represent the UK. We had a seat on the Council of Ministers. We had veto power. The reason why we didn't veto many of these laws or vastly disagree with them was because we agreed with the vast majority of EU law that was being implemented. The problem was, and it was always the problem, was that you got people like Angela Leadsom, these hardcore Brexiteers, who considered the EU to be a complete anathema. And that's why you can see the interviewer, I think, again, not wanting to derail her interview about this book, just drops the question because she's right. That's such a bizarre answer to give to a question. And bear in mind, I don't think she obviously realized at the time the Turing scheme had completely failed and failed to attract anyone to it. And bear in mind, Europe's just a hop, skip, and a jump across the pond. If you're a student, yeah, okay, you might get to go to Canada on it, but from what I at least also understand, I think the Turing scheme, you also get less money under the Turing scheme. So there's so many so many reasons why it was just such a failure and just was no near any good a replacement to the EU Erasmus scheme. But yeah, so that's Angela Leadsom's three Brexit benefits, but I'd hardly call them benefits of Brexit, especially when the first one, of course, about us being financial whiz kids. Well, doesn't look like that's going to last for too much longer. That's going to be fascinating when you now have like the full data and pretty much everyone goes, oh, well, the UK has lost its financial crown, which bear in mind, it's already happening. That'll be fun when that happens, how the Brexiteers respond to that. The second one about that one is just nonsensical. Because we had veto power. We could actually, not vote for the law in Parliament. There was a ton of things we could have done if we did disagree with an EU directive that we didn't want to follow. We could have done a whole ton of stuff. But the thing is, overwhelmingly, we agreed with a lot of these directives and regulations. So uh, we passed them. And then the third one, well, as the interviewer said, was just bizarre. In literally, but that's yeah, that's Angela Leadsom's three Brexit benefits. But it's kind of fun that we got this because normally they run away from the question. Even Angela Leadsom, after answering two, tried to say, "Oh well, actually, I've got this really long list," and you're like, "Well, excellent. If you've got this really long list, let's crack it out. Give us your top three, or fire three off the list you want." But they're pulling at straws more and more and more. And as the interviewer said, in this age, more people are reflecting on the massive negatives, the labor shortage, the tomato shortage that we're seeing, a whole ton of other different stuff that we can see is an effect of Brexit. That again, do you think your average UK voter is going to really care that, oh, now we've left the EU, we can be a leader in corporate financial governance? It's not what people like Angela Leadsom promised in 2016 at the Brexit vote. So, yeah, there you have it, folks. That's Angela Leadsom's three Brexit benefits. So, with that, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.